Welcome to the Jungian Drift. We invite you to join us as we explore contemporary developments in Jungian thought in the San Francisco Bay Area and beyond.
Hello, I'm Robert Carriger, therapist and candidate in analytic training at the San Francisco Jung Institute. Today we have with us Dr. Sebastian Sheldon, a fellow candidate in the analytic training program, and he's going to talk today about some of his work exploring the typological implications of the hit sitcom series Seinfeld, what it can tell us about human typology, and maybe give us a little bit of insight into human relations in general. So I just want to welcome you today, Dr. Sheldon.
I'm glad to be here, Robert.
Glad to have you. So can you say a bit about, what drew you to Seinfeld as a kind of a way to exemplify Jung's different typology categories and that whole typology theory?
Yeah, sure. Well, I remember reading in some personality typology book early on that certain fiction or movies or even bands sometimes seem to be popular because they cover the four bases of the four functions. And you see this maybe in Star Trek. You see this in the Wizard of Oz. And I remember the Beatles being an example of that, and someone writing about how John takes up the thinking function, Paul takes up the feeling function, Ringo takes up sensation, and George takes up the function of intuition, especially as seen later in his life when he matures more and gets very into spirituality. I thought that was really fascinating, that here, arguably the biggest band ever and still popular and still something people love today. Mm-hmm. It's this kind of perennial adoration of the Beatles. These four members seem to maybe, at least within the group, take up the four functions. I thought that was fascinating. And then somehow I think I kind of free associated into applying that to Seinfeld, that had these four main characters, where they seem to, take up these four functions as I was watching it. Yeah.
Before we dive in, could you describe Seinfeld for those who may have missed it?
Yeah. So for those of you who weren't alive in the 90s or were doing more constructive things with yourselves, Seinfeld was a major hit sitcom or situational comedy from the 1990s. Centered around a fictional version of Jerry Seinfeld, who in real life was a stand-up comedian, and in the show also played a stand-up comedian. And it was him and his three friends in New York City. Those friends were George, who was his best friend, Elaine, his ex-girlfriend, and Kramer, who was his next-door apartment neighbor. And the four characters would find themselves in uncomfortable and novel, awkward, comedic social situations. And that was basically the show.
I think it's safe to say that maybe this isn't like standard subject for Jungian analysis. What drew you to this show in particular as something to study?
So I was growing up at the time of this show, and it was kind of in the background of my youth, right? And weekly episodes were coming out in the 90s, and Jerry Seinfeld was eponymous with comedian. He was the image of the comedian. And I just remember it would crack up my family and me, and there was just something so inherently funny about all these situations. And I found it interesting that there was such universal appeal for this show. It was such a hit. Even now, I heard Netflix got the rights to it. What was it? It was about like something like $500 million or something crazy. And this is from 3 decades ago, a sitcom. So. Well,
I think I don't know if you mind me sharing with people that actually you were in a band.
Okay.
And did you find this applied to your life trying to coordinate with people in a band that this typology applied, or was that a separate topic?
Yeah. Well, I did see that play out. Now, the band I was in had 5 people, so it wasn't quite as tidy. But there was, I think, an emphasis on the sensing function or sensation that it became kind of the prevailing function of the band, where there's a real emphasis on aesthetics and drinking and smoking and sex and very sensory oriented things. Yet much of the lyrics and even the feeling of the music to me felt intuitive and abstract and kind of philosophical and dreamy. One lyric was something about the phantoms in the trees, and it's not concrete lyrics, though the way the band lived was very concrete. So there was a kind of polarity there between sensing and intuition in that particular band. So
you've seen it, seen it play out. So how do you see this when you look at Seinfeld? How do you see Jung's typologies playing out in Seinfeld?
Well, yeah. So I think that Seinfeld seems to be portraying the 4 functions, maybe even Jerry's 4 functions, through these 4 characters, as if the show is Jerry's dream. The way the different figures in a dream might represent different parts of yourself. And in that way, he so represents sensing. It's observational comedy. It's all about noticing things and staying concrete and not really going to abstract places with it, but just being a very clever, shrewd observer of things. And then you kind of, I think Jerry might be sensing, thinking, feeling, intuitive in that order. And so his best buddy is George, who's thinking, and often thinking types are characterized as having reading glasses that they wear all the time. And true to form here, the one character with reading glasses the whole time is George.
The nerd.
The nerd, yeah, right. And similarly with the Beatles example, John Lennon was the one with glasses,
Also kind of the nerd.
Right. Yeah, and was known as a kind of... he read a lot, he was constantly reading and a real thinker, And what's notable about George is he's always come up with schemes and plans and kind of formulas or formulae about how to approach situations, but there's not any feeling in it, so he kind of loses the nuance and the moral problems in his scheming, and that becomes very obvious that it's self-serving and not a comprehensive thinking that includes weighing the value of things. Elaine would be feeling, and again, we tend to feminize the feeling function, and the one character of the 4 that's female is Elaine. There was a situation where Jerry had made some comment that he thought might have actually killed a family member because that evening after she got upset about it, she died. But he had a baseball game at the time of the funeral, and he was on the same team as George. And there was some debate George and Elaine were having about it where, Elaine's like, how could you go to the baseball game? Your so-and-so grandma just died. And George is like, how could you not go? It's so, not really thinking about anything but himself, and so you kind of see the way, even though she's not personally involved, her feeling function that comes in and weighs things comes into effect, and then opposite the hall from Jerry, and then the opposite function from sensing is intuition. You have Kramer, who is wild and crazy and Einstein-like with his hair, and they say about extroverted intuition in particular that there's a kind of brainstorming of new inventions and ideas and what the future could hold. And Kramer, throughout all the seasons, is coming up with all these new kind of stupid ideas about various businesses, and he kind of has this entrepreneurial streak, but it's ineffective. It's like his intuitive power has been neutered or something like this. So, but that's an intuitive through the eyes of a sensation type. right? So it's not it's not a great representation of a true intuitive type. It's a sensation type showing how silly intuitive types are.
In a way, what you're saying is this is like life in Jerry Seinfeld's psyche.
Exactly.
And just to remind people that maybe haven't read up on typology in a while, so there's 4 fundamental ways of perceiving or experiencing or processing the world in consciousness, according to Jung. And one is sensation, and one is thinking, intuition, and feeling. These are considered 4 different ways, and they can be extroverted or introverted. So you're saying is that, in a sense, Seinfeld is inside Jerry's mind. And so in Jerry's mind, Jerry is then the ego, and his ego is a sensation orientation.
That's right, yeah. So Jung wrote that sensation establishes what is actually given, thinking enables us to recognize its meaning, feeling tells us its value, and finally intuition points to the possibilities of the whence and whither that lie within the immediate facts.
Yeah.
According to Jung. I think it is kind of, it's interesting that the show is called Seinfeld, right? Right. Yeah. We are kind of in the psyche of Seinfeld in a way, right? It
starts with him telling jokes about himself, and then it shows his inside his mind, and then it ends with him telling jokes about himself.
Right, exactly. And according to John Beebe, right, our third function is one we like to kind of play with. It's associated with the puer or puella archetype, the eternal child. And, if Seinfeld's third function is feeling, and feeling has to do with values and morality and the weighing of the worth of things, there does seem to be a constant playing with morality. They're not serious about it. They're not trying to make people more moral by watching this show.
Yeah.
It's more being presented with morally ambiguous situations, showing people kind of be bad. And,
well, I'm wondering so as kind of characters, right? So would you say that they're kind of pushed to extremes? So like it's like this is what happens when an extreme thinker deals with something, and an extreme feeler or extreme intuitive. And so they become a bit outlandish, right? They're not quite grounded. And it gets kind of funny, right? To see.
Right. I would say that's true about sensing, thinking, and intuition, but for Elaine, she also kind of lacks some degree of a moral although of the 4 of them, she would be maybe the more moral one.
Yeah.
But we're still in the psyche of Jerry, and arguably Larry David too, the co-founder. Morality is fuzzy and something to be poked at and prodded at, but it's not, something to really learn from. I think there's some statement Larry David made that was like, no learning, no hugging, right? Both, we're not learning lessons here, and we're not being very emotional with each other, right? So it's kind of a little bit of a push against feeling throughout the show, even in Elaine, who might represent it more than the others.
I think sometimes it can be a little bit ambiguous with the valuing kind of functions of thinking and feeling, right? Because often we think of feeling as being super emotional or sentimental, and I think that's what you're saying, that Elaine isn't quite that,
right?
But that's kind of the opposite of thinking, and it sounds like a lot of the dynamics, like you point out, is kind of George and Elaine kind of debating how they would solve things,
right,
and
or sometimes a tension between George Jerry and Kramer.
Yeah.
Right. They have a tension too going, but not much tension between George and Jerry. Really. Right.
So they might see things differently, but there isn't that kind of, they're not at odds with each other.
Right. I'm thinking of the episode where Elaine got George a big salad, which costs a little extra, and George is just, vexed by this.
Yeah.
You had to get the big salad because he doesn't like that he now owes her something because she did something generous and didn't think twice about it. And that becomes a problem for him, and so you kind of see that tension there. Right.
That's the pure logic. He's thinking logically, okay, there's a in a relationship there's kind of a balance. There's a ledger that people keep. And he's taking it very literally. Like,
Right.
now I owe her because she did this for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But based on her stronger feeling function and kind of greater morality to some extent, she was just doing something nice. And that he doesn't have a place for that to land.
Yeah. Can't process that. Yeah, he's rating it based on the effect. The effect is it puts me in her debt, so she must have meant to do that.
That's right. Yeah.
And but I wonder if Elaine, so on that level, because we think of feeling as kind of sentimental, but is Elaine, you say she's not sentimental or that kind of, but is it using that kind of insight in a way that's also can be kind of just as manipulative in its own way to her own ends and that?
It's a good question. I wonder. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but that's. Is there an example that comes to your mind of that, or I don't know if you have it pulled up in your
solution to the ending of the contraceptive sponge.
Oh yeah, are you sponge worthy? Yeah,
her way of solving this dilemma. Is that a feeling way of?
Oh right, where she can weigh: are you worthy? What's the worth? Yeah. Right, that's part of what the feeling function's doing. Yeah, but here's a kind of crude Seinfeldian example of it. Yeah.
So now you're saying with like if it's Jerry's psyche, right? So if he's coming from a sensation place, and you're saying Kramer's intuition, then often that might be considered to be more of also represent a shadow in some way, or is that
right?
Yeah,
right. It's his inferior function.
Yeah.
If Seinfeld is a sensation type, then the theory holds that intuition would be his inferior function, and you can kind of feel the shadow around Kramer, right? He's ineffective. He's maybe not entirely as human as the other characters. Although, interestingly, we're endeared by him maybe more than the other characters. There's a kind of naivety that's endearing about him.
It's almost a quality of like a very tall child.
Yeah, right, right. Or a pet or something. Yeah. And they played with that in one episode where he starts acting like a dog because he's taking dog medication or something, or eating dog food or something like that, and starts acting like a dog. And
he's always coming up with kind of goofy ideas,
right?
That kind of work,
right, exactly. And it's again uncanny that outside of the paradigm of Seinfeld, people talk about extroverted intuition specifically as kind of usually a hallmark or primary function of an entrepreneur.
Oh.
Right. And then here you have him, a coffee book table about coffee books or things like this that
turns into a coffee table, a book that turns into a coffee table.
Right. There's a whole Wikipedia section on the various inventions and ideas for businesses that Kramer had throughout all the seasons, right? And so it's interesting they could kind of intuitively nail that. They really got that somehow. Which then makes me think, well, there is a lot of intuition going on in the show, but it's not in the usual intuitive stylings.
Yeah.
Like it's intuition towards, this would be a funny idea.
Yeah.
Not intuition about, like Steve Jobs had, about let's combine a computer, a cell phone, an iPod, an MP3 player, and make the iPhone, right? That's intuition in a combined with thinking in a more kind of pronounced way.
So his plots are to import Cuban cigar rollers or something at some point.
Right. His ideas are ridiculous, but still he's trying to generate them anyway, and can't stop.
Yeah, and it's unclear. It's never clear, right, how he has an income at all.
Right.
He's the least adapted. The others somehow managed to get through life. They somehow have found a niche. They're kind of functioning as adults.
Right.
With him, it's extraordinarily unclear how he's doing it.
He's low functioning.
Yeah.
Whereas Jerry's probably the highest functioning. I think even in the show, there's some little hints that he's a famous comedian. And doing well.
Yeah.
And opposite to him is this unemployed, low functioning, crazy guy, and even the hair, it's like Einstein, and Einstein was probably also an intuitive type to come up with these abstract ideas about the universe out of nowhere and seemingly through his imagination. And so it's interesting too how Kramer kind of looks like he is not of this time or space or era. He dresses like he's from some mixture of other decades. His name is Cosmo, right? Also referring to something abstract, space, spacey, And here's Jerry, a person of his time and place, wearing the proper attire, the tight-fitting jeans and the baggy-ish sweater or button-down shirt, and goes to the gym. It looks like someone from the 90s, and Kramer doesn't, has that timelessness that you can get with the intuitive function, the spacey, timeless, nebulous abstractness,
Well, it's interesting in terms of personality, or in terms of the show. What does Kramer bring to it? What's his ingredient that makes it work, that it wouldn't work if he weren't there?
Well, it's interesting because, again, this is a show portrayed through the lens or filter of a sensation type.
Yeah.
And part of how we come to know him as an intuitive type is through his body language and his dress and attire.
Oh.
Right. And he's kind of famous for his entrance into Jerry's apartment, where he flings the door open and has some weird thing where he almost falls down, or, and the audience cheer. It gets to the point where the audience anticipates it and starts cheering for the weirder and weirder entrances he makes.
Yeah.
And there's something about Kramer's body language and appearance, again, these kind of concrete, measurable things that make the intuitive function kind of more comprehensible to a sensation type. But it might only land as, they're weird, and not scratch too much further beneath the surface of what the intuitive function could be about.
Well, I guess I was just wondering if you were looking at, this is Jerry's psyche, and so you see in terms of decision making or values in the world, he's got the George thinking type versus the Elaine feeling type. The kind of debate, almost like two angels on the shoulders, kind of influencing him. I mean, I'm just thinking in terms of just generally the shadow, we could say, kind of carries often unwelcome energy, but it's also kind of energizing and kind of helps things be creative. Does he kind of interject some element into the mix that stirs things up in a way that maybe wouldn't happen if you weren't there?
That's so interesting, Robert. I mean, and I think the character of Kramer is high energy.
Yeah.
Probably the highest energy of all, right? I mean, kind of almost an ADHD-ness, which I think you can get from intuitive types sometimes, right? They can be confused as people with ADHD could be confused with someone whose first function's intuition, or vice versa. And there is something energizing about him, and it does seem like it throws in something from another paradigm or dimension into the mix when Kramer comes in, and it makes it interesting.
Yeah, it seems like he instigates quite a few of their adventures, right? So,
right.
That Jerry's commenting on and making into comedy, but
right. Well, and Jerry's so capable of being, kind of sensible.
Yeah.
In the way some sensation types can be.
Yeah.
Especially introverted sensation. And so when you bring Kramer in, what could have been just a routine trip somewhere to take care of a task, it becomes some misadventure.
Yeah. Falling in a whale.
right.
Saving whales.
Right. So he does keep it interesting. Yeah.
You said that it's a lot of this interest in kind of looking at Seinfeld as an example of the kind of different typologies interacting and in somebody's mind, their psyche, how the different aspects of their self play off along these lines of different types. Do you any sense, like you said that you'd read that like some of these kind of groups, either ensembles, bands, seem to have this pattern where they had members of representing the 4 different types working together.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a sense on what might that be that makes that so appealing to for viewers or listeners, or what does that do in the chemistry of a show like this that makes it appealing? Because there's something we were talking beforehand. We were talking a bit, and I expressed that I did think there's something really interesting about something like Seinfeld, where these people of wildly different outlooks like it, right? You get people that may not agree on anything, but they all like Seinfeld. There seems to be something universal about it that appeals to people.
That's a great question. I think that Jung didn't invent the 4 functions when he started talking about them. I think he noticed something. Right. And other people noticed them before, the 4 humors, and this didn't begin with Jung, and I think more than half of his book on personality typology is him just tracking the way a lot of other people have already been thinking about these things. And so he's getting at something universal or archetypal in the human personality and in human consciousness, right? That these are kind of 4 or 8 forms of consciousness if we attach the introverted or extroverted attitude onto the 4 functions. They're forms of consciousness that then, if 1 or 2 of them are prevailing within you, start to somewhat define your personality. These are ancient, and we respond to it because when we see it really distilled in a character, we might, without having language for it, kind of recognize the familiarity of it, that this is in us, this is universal, or it's appealing maybe even to see it so distilled or boiled down or refined in some, which is actually somewhat rare. We tend to use all of them to some extent.
So it's something that resonates with people. So even if you're not a New York City hipster, you could still somehow relate to the Kramer and Elaine and the whole crowd, even if your life has nothing in common. But some part of you kind of relates to that.
That's right. Yeah, which is a little unfortunate for Seinfeld, for us Jungians, because intuition is probably the function we use the most, right? Or it's a field that draws intuitive types most primarily, and then feeling types secondarily. At least lately it does. I think there used to be more thinking types. But I think it's also, Seinfeld captured the zeitgeist, the kind of how things were in America in the 90s and what kinds of things were valued. And I think sensing and thinking were valued more than feeling and more than intuition. I think feeling might have been valued more in the 60s. Intuition might have been valued more then, but things changed between that time, the 60s and the 90s, right?
Well, I think that I don't think that most of us probably realize that how much theory went into the making of Seinfeld, and probably won't be able to watch a Seinfeld episode again quite the same way. And thanks for pointing out that the Jungians are the Kramers of the
that's right.
psychotherapy world, these intuitive types.
Seen through the eyes of sensation types.
Seen through the eyes. Okay, an important caveat there. Well, it's been so great talking to you, and so great to hear all these thoughts, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for listening. This has been a production of the Jungian Drift. There are hosts and guests may be affiliated with the C.G. Jung Institute of San Francisco. Please note that the Jungian Drift LLC operates independently from the San Francisco Institute. The purpose of this podcast, it's educational, not intended to be used as therapeutic advice. For more information about this episode, visit us at thejungiandrift.com.
Boys, I think you have a career in radio.
That was beautiful. Avi, high five. You said such hard words. Those were really hard words.